What if the reason you're not having conversations with your child has nothing to do with words? So often families come to us and they say, "All I want is for to have a conversation with my child." And we know that if you're here, then you're probably wanting the same thing.
You want to know your child. You want to hear from them what their interests and their preferences are. You want to know their thoughts and you want to be able to have shared interactions with them.
Yeah, you want to be able to say something to your child and have them respond back, not because you're prompting, not because you're holding out, not giving them something until they do, but simply because they want to. So, what if the missing piece is not working on more words? What if the real problem is that your child does not yet understand that it's worth it to communicate in the first place?
Before we dive in, if you are a parent that wants more natural, joyful communication with your autistic communicator, make sure you subscribe here and join our free community because every week we share practical strategies that are really helping families build that connection and communication that they're looking for.
So, what does a back and forth interaction look like? So, let's look at typically developing babies. When they are very new, little babies, we instinctively will make a sound or we'll do raspberries on their tummy, right? And then the baby will, in response, the baby will laugh or do something, make a sound, and then it goes back and forth, right? And this is the beginning of the development of a natural back and forth interaction. And then that back and forth is fostered and nurtured from there.
Grows naturally out of those tiniest moments of connection with your baby, those unplanned moments that you have within daily routines. And these interactions, they grow into more and more back and forth nonverbal communication. And this is how back and forth communication develops within neurotypically developing children without very little thought or planning.
So parents of neurotypically developing children, they take this for granted, right? But for our autistic communicators, this is where the work is. And this is where we can make the biggest difference. Because without an understanding that there is value, purpose, power, and joy in their own communication, back and forth interaction just cannot grow, and neither can conversation. And this is why we work here.
Nonverbal back and forth interactions are at the root of a future back and forth conversation. Nonverbal back and forth interactions are as valuable as a back and forth conversation, as a verbal back and forth conversation, because it is only when we nurture the first that we have the possibility for the second.
Yeah, we had a dad in coaching whose dream was to throw a ball back and forth with his son. But every time he would try, his son would walk away and his dad was so discouraged. He thought they had a ton of different balls. He thought at first that it was the ball, the type of ball, the size of ball, or it was how he was doing it, that he was doing something wrong. But it was simply that his son did not yet understand that there is value and purpose and power and joy in having a face-to-face interaction. So that had to be ignited and nurtured first.
Many autistic communicators who are not yet consistently tuned into the people and the events in their environment simply don't know the value, purpose, power, and joy of the communication process yet. So, finding pleasure and purpose in the communication process must be ignited and nurtured because finding the joy here is where we create that internal desire for a back and forth interaction. So without knowing that back and forth feels good and is worth it, there is little meaningful communication and connection that can happen. So before they will ever share a back and forth object with you, they must understand the value of the back and forth interaction with you first.
And this just makes sense, right? As adults, we don't participate in things without knowing that there is value and that it has a purpose, do we? We are more apt to learn something or take on something because we understand its purpose and its value. So consider taking classes in school. We're fairly certain that the ones that you retained information from and naturally use later was not information that you learned just for the test, right? It was because you understood that there was a value and a purpose to it.
So consider those aha moments that you've had in your own life, moments where all of a sudden you're learning something new and you realize its value. So the information that was of the most value to you is what is retained and then used in other areas, right?
Yet, how much did you learn in school that you only learned for the test, right?
Oh,
You learned it for the end goal, right? But very little was internalized. So much of what we learned for a test stays tied to that specific situation, right? We may perform well in the moment, but it doesn't always carry over into the natural daily life.
so many communication approaches focus heavily on helping a child produce a specific communication behavior within a specific moment. And they are teaching our autistic communicators to produce a specific communication act in order to receive something in return. And while that may create success in that moment, it doesn't always help a child discover why communication is valuable to them.
Yeah, when we work and we wait and we prompt for a specific type of communication instead of responding to the communication they're giving naturally, then it really is like teaching to a test because the result is the outcome or a score, as it would be on a test, or that specific interaction, how they perform. But it rarely moves beyond that. But just like how we are, when we can help them see the value of their own experience in the communication process, the value of what they're teaching them, then it creates that internal motivation to do it beyond just for a momentary reward.
So, when we help them understand that communication is more than a transaction, communication is a shared experience. It brings power to them, it brings joy. And when children discover that for themselves, communication starts to grow from the inside out.
And then what they learn from these kinds of interactions, what they learn continues to grow and eventually thrives far beyond this one interaction. And we help them understand that there is power in using their voice, whether it's verbal or not, and that there is joy in understanding how good it can feel to connect.
That internal desire for a meaningful, shared back and forth interaction is what we call the social driver. So, if the social driver is not lit naturally for many autistic communicators, a key piece of our approach is to ignite it. So, you ignite it by helping your child realize one interaction at a time that there is value to tuning into you and that there is a whole purpose for this communication process. And when they use it, that it brings them both power and joy.
So you ignite the social driver just like starting the embers of a fire. You ignite it by using all the tools that we described here and in our free community. So how do you ignite this social driver? You do this by first dropping all of the strategies many you've been taught to prompt or withhold for a specific type of communication. You let go of all expectations and you switch the focus to understanding and learning your child in a whole new way. You back it up to the most basic form of an interaction to begin to build their understanding that at its most basic level, it feels good to connect and communicate within an interaction that goes back and forth.
For some of you in the beginning, it will feel like you're going backwards, but you're actually working here because it's only when you work here that you awaken in the child an internal desire to connect and communicate. And this must come before anything else.
To ignite your child's social driver and to nurture it into more and more natural communication, our approach focuses on the tools you use within social games and songs. By using the tools we teach, you will start drawing your child into interactions little by little so they tune into you more and more. Then over time, you learn how to use these strategies to create more of a back and forth interaction.
Okay, so let's jump in. So first you'll choose a simple social game like peekaboo, or maybe your child loves it when you pick them up and you spin them around. You can also choose a song that they like. So the key to this process is that there are no rules, but you will use the tools and just see how your child responds. And when they like it, you do more of it. As you will learn as you delve more into using our tools, You cannot just use your regular voice or do a game or social song in the traditional way. You're going to have to be what our families call a cartoon character of yourself.
So let's say your child kind of likes Wheels on the Bus. They don't have to love it, but it's a place where you've seen them tune in, even briefly. So you start singing that song and you're going to try using different tools. Very often, we recommend one of the tools that we talk about is the anticipatory breath. That's that big breath you take right before you start something. So, and see what they do. So for Wheels on the Bus, you'd the wheels on the bus go round and round. You can have a short breath, a longer breath to see what happens. And then you're going to notice, what do they do? You're going to pay close attention to where they may be tuning in. Do they stop what they're doing to tune in? You're not watching or waiting for a look because very often they won't. So pay close attention to all of the other communication they're giving. Are they running around and they stop running briefly? Do they move a little closer to you? Do they kind of lean in? If you see any form of communication, you're going to bring more of that fun.
Let's talk about another tool, and that is pace. So, for pace, what you can do is speed up a song. And kids often really tune into this. So, you're going to notice when I speed up the song, do they tune in? Another tool is that you can use big movements. Remember, you're being that cartoon character of yourself. So, you're exaggerating all those big movements for the songs, for example. Another tool would be to repeat their favorite part of a song. So if they like the horn on the bus goes beep, 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 you're going to just repeat that part of the song because you already know they really like it. There's no rule that you have to sing all the verses of Wheels on the Bus if your kids only really like one of the verses. So we're going to just repeat the one they really like. So the key is that, like Sherry was explaining, as soon as you see that communication, you're going to respond with more of it. So you're drawing them into the interaction little by little, just one brief moment at a time, as you learn what is working best for your child.
So it could also be a social game, like one of many versions of peekaboo. You can hide behind a pillow and pay attention to how they respond to different tools that you're using. So you could do the anticipatory breath, like we just talked about, or you can stretch out peekaboo. So pika and see what they do. You're going to pay close attention to what they're tuning into. You're going to look for any signs of tuning in. This is communication. And when you respond to it immediately, your child starts to learn that their very own communication is what is bringing the fun that you're bringing for them. The slightest bit of tuning in matters. And when you practice the tools and you pay close attention, then you're going to start to notice more and more little sparks, little places where you can ignite that social driver.
So this is where the gold is. And this is really where you build their internal desire to connect and communicate. So you bring the fun with a tool. You're going to watch for any sign of tuning in, and then you're going to bring more of it. And in one tiny, tiny moment at a time, they begin to connect that their actions, even if it's not intentional yet, they're going to start to connect that their actions have value because they are making you do something that they really like.
Yes. And at first, as you work, it will feel like you are doing all the work, and that's because you are. And this is a natural part of the process. We want you to remember that because what are you doing? You're helping them understand that there's value in tuning into people and tuning into what's happening around them, right? You're helping them understand that their communication is the key to something that feels good.
So this takes time, and that's part of the process. But over time, as you drop all expectation, the prompting, the pressurized strategies, and you meet them where they are within interaction after interaction within those social games and songs, you will see your child rise up to sharing that interaction with you a little bit at a time. And then it's going to be more and more over time.
So one day your child may use words, one day they may use the AAC, or both. One day they may tell you about their interests, their thoughts, and their dreams, but every one of these future possibilities being tiny moments where your child discovers that their own communication has value, that communication feels good, and that being understood brings power.
and that sharing experiences with another person brings joy. All meaningful communication starts right here. If this way of thinking about communication feels different from what you've been taught before, you are not alone in that. And that's exactly why we created our free community.
Inside, we teach parents how to learn how to ignite that social driver within songs, within social games, and within simple everyday routines to help your child's desire to communicate grow. You'll find trainings, you'll find practical examples, and a growing community of families that are sharing the same journey you are. We'd love to have you. The link is below.